Have you ever noticed that when polymer clay comes out of the oven, it is very flexible? Today we're going to use that fact to our advantage to create these beautiful dimensional flowers using supplies from the March Green Woman CreateAlong Box. Hi there, Sandy Huntress here for CreateAlong. So we'll start with some polymer clay rolled out on the second thickest setting of your pasta machine. On mine, it's about 2.5 millimeters thick. And we're going to bring in the Tree of Life rubber stamp that came in the box. I love this design. There's so many interesting bits to this. Now, of course, your stamp is going to be brand new out of the box, which means it may have some residue from the manufacturing process, so you want to wash it. Otherwise, your first impression is going to have this gray powder on the top of the design. You can, if that happens to you, you can just wash it off under the sink. But what I did was, before I used this, I washed it under some running water and scrubbed it with a nail brush so it's nice and clean. Just to be safe, let's add a release. Just a drop or two of Armor All is all you need. Add it to your clay sheet and rub it all over, and that way you don't have to worry about getting the release in the cracks and crevices of your stamp. I'm going to place this with that side down and send it through the pasta machine on the thickest setting. So the sheet was rolled out on the second thickest setting. You could roll it a little thinner if you want. We're going to send it through with the stamp on the thickest setting. When it comes out of the pasta machine and is trimmed up, it will look like this. Now you can send it through the pasta machine one of two ways. Now you might notice you will get a little distortion. This design, it's pretty much the same height, but notice that if I put the designs side by side, this one got just a little bit wider. That's because I sent it through the pasta machine this way. If you have a particular design that you want to preserve, then try to keep in mind which way would give you less distortion. In this case, I'm not worried about it at all. Next, we're going to cut out two shapes from this set of flower cutters. These are ones I designed for CreateAlong. You can find them. They're called Sandy's Boho Henna Flowers. I actually designed a silk screen to go with these, but we're not going to use that today. So we're going to use the largest and the smallest in this set. And you want to choose an area for the front, or the visible part, and also an area for the back. So whatever you prefer for the front, I think I'm going to focus on these pretty little swirls. And then the back, that doesn't really matter, but what's nice about making a nice back is that when it flips over, you've got something pretty to look at instead of a back. It looks good either way. If the cutters are giving you a little bit of a hard time going through the clay, just use an acrylic block. And that way you can get that all the way down to the tile. Now, CreateAlong's newer cutters, I have noticed, have gotten a lot sharper, which is lovely for using them. But if you have a set of older cutters, like these don't have those lovely sharp edges, you may need to come in with a craft knife and just clean up that little bit of clay that was underneath that blunt edge of the cutter. Once you've cut away that excess clay, you can just go in and give it gentle taps and pats and really clean up those edges so they look nice. These are going to be the finished edges of our jewelry, so make it as nice as you can. By the way, alternatively, if you don't want a texture, you could use the Green Woman silkscreen that comes in the box. This has some gorgeous areas of design that you could choose and have something a little bit different. You could also, this is the back, as I said, we are going to see some of the front. You could, at this point, carefully, gently silkscreen on this side. So once those edges are nice and cleaned up, we'll add a little mica powder. This one I added a couple of different pinks, which I think is quite pretty for springtime. This one I'm going to do turquoise. And the way you remember how to open these jars is threads up. That way you don't end up spilling piles of mica powder all over the place. And to not get excess mica in areas that you don't want it on your design, dip your finger in and then give it a few firm taps on the edge, and that will get rid of the excess. So you can just wipe over the high spots. And do that every time you tap in. And then you don't get those big clumps of powder that end up going where you don't want them. That's a pretty combination. Next, let's color these edges so they look deliberate, like you planned to leave them that way and not just something you got lazy about and didn't finish. These are Deco Color paint pens, and they're terrific. They come in lots of colors. They come in gold, silver, copper, rose gold. Rose gold is the one I used on this flower, and it's really more of a pink than a coppery rose gold. I've done a whole video about them on my YouTube channel. You can just search for paint pen. And the way they work is they have kind of a felt tip, and you just pump it. And it'll start to flow. And what you want for this application is you want to get almost a little puddle of the paint. There we go. And that will let you get a much smoother application. If you have a little puddle when you start painting it on, it almost gives you like a bead of the paint. So you just paint all of your edges and then do that also for the smaller one and set it aside to dry. So I added another spiral. I also used a rhinestone pickup tool to add some little crystals from the embellishments bottle that came in the Green Woman box. And then these are some 2mm crystals that came in a previous box. And I'm going to just tuck a few here and there. So press these in fairly firmly. Not so firmly that it goes all the way through to the table, but firmly enough that when we pick this up and try to shape it, they hopefully won't fall out. I'm also going to pull aside one of these little silver cabochons and use it for the center, but I'm not going to put that in place quite yet. Next, we'll pick this up and give it a little bit of shape. It's one of the reasons I love this design, and one of the thoughts I had in mind when I designed it was that you can pinch these and just get such a pretty design so easily. And suddenly it has dimensionality. You can really see those nice curved edges, very graceful. Back to the larger piece, you have a few choices here for what you can do. On this one, you see here's the back, the textured part with the mica powders, and on the front what I did was I took that paint marker and just painted on radiating lines to give the feel of flower petals. But you don't have to do that. You could just texture it, like with a needle tool. You could silkscreen it with the silkscreen. You'd have to do it carefully, but it could be done. You could just leave it plain, the color of the clay. You could even make this in a different color clay. So whatever you want to embellish, and you can see from this one about how much of that is going to show. For this one, I decided to go in rather heavily with the same mica powder that I used to highlight the textured sides. And that will give a nice contrast, I think, between that green one and then the blue-green one. To put these together, you want to first add a nice little dollop of liquid clay to the middle. That way we don't have to press too hard in order to get these pieces to adhere. Then you'll take your smaller one and put it right in the middle, offset, so the petals are going offset. And then you can take your cabochon for the center And this is why we saved it, so we can press that. And that will help our little petals adhere. I almost forgot, you'll also want to pinch these large outer ones to give them that same shape. And if I'd remembered, I would have done it before I added the other flower, but you can do it now too. There's one final step before you bake it. You want to take just some fine tissue, little tiny bits, and I like using this blunt tip tool so I don't wreck anything. And you're just going to tuck a piece under each of these small petals. This will keep them from sticking to the big petal, the back part, so that you can shape them independently later. And also kind of tell them where you want them to be. But it doesn't have to lift it up real high. Just tuck it in there. And now bake at the manufacturer's recommended temperature for 45 minutes. Now how do we go from this to this beautiful dimensional look? Well, I will show you that after baking. So this piece just came out of the oven. In fact, you can see I got the pot holder here. It was so hot. And you can see it's very loose and floppy. So while it's still warm, let's pull out these little bits of tissue. Some may have gotten stuck on the liquid clay in there. Just pull them out as best you can right now. Now I have here a 1-inch circle cutter. And what I'm going to do is tuck all of the points of that small flower right in there. Look at that. That's cool. Now I have a 2-inch circle cutter. And I'm just going to drop that right in the middle and try to keep it in the middle and let it cool like that. You can do this with any of your polymer clay pieces. If they're thin enough and they're kind of floppy when they come out of the oven, you can find some way to prop and shape them. And once they're cool, and it takes longer to cool than you might think, but once they're cool, they will hold that shape. So the polymer is now completely cool and we can remove the forms. And you can see now we have this great shape, sort of like a lotus blossom or a lily, and it's just really beautiful. And if you want to reshape it, you can always just warm it gently with the heat tool or put it back in the oven and get it exactly the way you like. You can glue on a bail to make it into a pendant. Add a stick to make it a plant poke, all sorts of things. You could even put 2 back to back with something in between that would maybe sit in your garden. So take this technique and run with it. There are so many different applications for other projects in polymer clay. Once again, this is Sandy Huntress for CreateAlong, wishing you happy creating.